The human man sprawled in a crumpled heap at the edge of the frozen lake, blood seeping from a gash above his temple where he had struck his head on the ice. And Kora knew she should simply walk away before anyone saw her helping one of them. But something in the way his breath came out in shallow puffs of white vapor, something in the vulnerability of his unconscious form, made her tusks worry at her lower lip as she glanced around the winter-bare trees surrounding the lake. No one. The human village lay 2 miles east, her own clan's winter camp 3 miles north, and here in this disputed territory between their peoples, she was alone with a dying man whose kind had killed her brother just last spring. She knelt beside him anyway, her thick fingers surprisingly gentle as she examined the wound. Not fatal if treated quickly, but he would freeze before he regained consciousness. The ice skates still strapped to his boots explained what had happened. He had ventured out alone, probably testing the ice after the first true freeze of the season, and had fallen. Stupid. But then humans were often stupid about such things, thinking themselves invincible until the frontier proved otherwise. Kora made her decision with the swift certainty that had always been both her greatest strength and most troublesome quality. She unstrapped the skates from his feet with practiced efficiency, bundled them together with their leather laces, and then hoisted the man over her shoulders. He was not small, probably close to 6 feet tall and well-muscled beneath his wool coat, but her orc strength made the burden manageable. She began the trek back to her shelter, each step deliberate as she navigated the snowy bank and headed into the forest. Her shelter was little more than a hunter's cabin, abandoned by whoever had built it years ago, and claimed by her when her clan had cast her out 3 months prior. The crime had been insufficient in their eyes, merely speaking against the war chief's plan to raid the human settlement come spring, but it had been enough to mark her as other. So she lived here now, in this between place, belonging to neither world and trusted by none. She shouldered through the door and laid the human on her sleeping pallet near the stone hearth. The fire had burned low while she had been checking her trap lines, so she built it up quickly, then turned her attention to her unexpected patient. His coat came off easily enough, followed by his outer layers until she could properly assess him for injuries. Beyond the head wound, he seemed intact. She cleaned the gash with melted snow water and a strip of clean cloth, then wrapped it snugly. Only then did she truly look at his face. Young, perhaps 25 winters at most, with a strong jaw and features that might have been handsome by human standards. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell across his forehead in damp strands. A small scar marked his chin, another his left hand, the kind of marks that came from hard work rather than battle. A farmer or craftsman then, not a soldier. She built up the fire higher and prepared a simple broth from dried meat and herbs, letting it simmer while she waited for him to wake. The afternoon light slanted through the single window, painting golden stripes across the rough wooden floor. Outside, the winter wind began to pick up, whistling through the trees with a sound like distant voices. She was glad she had found him when she had. Another hour and he would have been beyond saving. Consciousness returned to him gradually. First his fingers twitched, then his eyelids fluttered. Finally, his eyes opened, and Kora found herself looking into irises the color of storm clouds, gray with hints of blue. They focused on her face, widened with shock, then with fear. "Easy," she said, keeping her voice low and calm. "You hit your head. You are safe." He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, groaning and pressing a hand to his bandaged temple. "What? Where am I, my home?" "I found you unconscious by the lake." His gaze sharpened despite the obvious pain. She watched him take in her appearance, the green of her skin, the tusks that protruded from her lower jaw, the pointed tips of her ears visible through her dark hair. "You're an orc. Very observant." She ladled broth into a wooden bowl. "Here, drink this." He made no move to take it, his body tensing as though preparing to flee or fight. "Why would you help me?" "Because you would have died otherwise. Your people killed my cousin last year. Your people killed my brother last spring." She met his gaze steadily. "We can trade grievances if you wish, or you can drink the broth and regain your strength so you can leave. Your choice." He stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Fear and prejudice battled against pragmatism, and perhaps, just perhaps, a spark of curiosity. Finally, he reached for the bowl with a trembling hand. She pretended not to notice the way he positioned himself for quick movement, as though she might attack at any moment. The broth was good, hearty, and warming. She watched him drain half the bowl before he paused. "What's your name?" "Kora. Matthew Norris." He touched his bandaged head gingerly. "How long was I unconscious? An hour, perhaps 2. It is hard to say. The sun was higher when I found you." "I should go. My family will worry. You should rest. The sun will set soon, and you are in no condition to travel in the dark. Morning will be better." She could see he wanted to argue, but exhaustion and pain won out. He finished the broth and lay back down, his eyes never quite leaving her as she moved about the cabin, checking her supplies and preparing her own simple meal. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and the weight of generations of conflict. Night fell fully, and with it came a dropping temperature that made the cabin walls creak. Kora added more wood to the fire and settled on the floor near the hearth, leaving the pallet for her patient. She wrapped herself in a heavy fur and closed her eyes, though she did not truly sleep. Years of living on the edge of danger had taught her to rest while remaining alert, and she could feel the human's wakeful presence like a physical thing. "Why do you live out here alone?" His voice cut through the darkness, surprising her. She opened her eyes but did not turn to look at him. "I spoke against my clan's war chief. It was considered unacceptable. So they exiled you, in a manner of speaking. What did you say? That raiding your people's settlements would only bring more violence, that we should seek peace instead of war." She did turn then, meeting his gaze across the firelit space. "I was not popular for this opinion." Matthew was quiet for a moment. "There are humans who feel the same way, my father among them. He thinks the conflict is pointless, that we could coexist if both sides would just stop being what we are," Kora finished when he trailed off. "Stop fearing what we do not understand," something like that. They lapsed back into silence, but it felt different now, less hostile and more contemplative. Eventually, Kora heard Matthew's breathing deepen and even out as true sleep finally claimed him. She allowed herself to relax slightly, though she remained vigilant. Trust was a luxury neither of them could afford, but perhaps, for tonight at least, they could maintain this fragile truce. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows. Kora woke to find Matthew already sitting up, testing his mobility with careful movements. The bandage around his head showed no fresh blood, which was a good sign. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I fell on ice and cracked my skull." But he offered a small, wry smile with the words, "Better than yesterday, though." She prepared a simple breakfast of oat porridge and dried berries, and this time he accepted the bowl without hesitation. They ate in a silence that felt almost companionable, the morning light growing stronger as it pushed back the night. "I should return home," Matthew said finally, "but I wanted to thank you first, for saving my life, for—" He gestured vaguely at the cabin, "all of this. You are welcome." He stood slowly, testing his balance, and she gathered his dried outer layers. As he dressed, she retrieved his ice skates from where she had stored them by the door. The blades gleamed in the morning light, well made and clearly cared for. "These are fine craftsmanship," she observed, running a finger along one smooth blade. "My father makes them. We have a small forge. He shoes horses mostly, but he makes skates in the winter when work is slow." Matthew took them from her, his fingers briefly overlapping hers. Neither of them moved for a heartbeat, the contact electric in its unexpectedness. Then he pulled back, clearing his throat. "Do you skate?" "I have never tried." "Never." He looked genuinely surprised. "But you live right by the lake." "Ice and my people do not mix well. We are heavy. Strong but not graceful." She touched one of her tusks self-consciously, an old gesture from her youth. "Not built for such things." "That's not, I mean." Matthew fumbled for words. "You should try it. Before the ice melts, it's—" His face lit up despite the bandage and the lingering pallor of injury. "It's like flying. Like the world falls away and there's just you and the ice and the wind." Kora felt something strange twist in her chest at his enthusiasm, at the unguarded joy in his expression. When had anyone last looked at her like that, with openness instead of fear or disgust? "Perhaps," she said, knowing she meant no. Matthew seemed to understand. He nodded, some of the light fading from his eyes. "Well, thank you again. For everything." "Be more careful on the ice," she said, walking him to the door. "Test it with a branch before you venture out." "I will." He paused on the threshold, wind ruffling his dark hair. "Kora, if you ever need anything, help or, I don't know. My family's farm is about 3 miles east, near the old oak that was split by lightning. The one that looks like a wishbone. Ask for the Norris place." "I know it." She had scouted all the human settlements in her wanderings, though she had never approached them. "But I will not come. It would not be safe, for you or for me." "Maybe not. But the offer stands." He left then, trudging through the snow toward the rising sun and whatever home waited for him there. Kora watched until he disappeared among the trees, then closed the door and set about cleaning the cabin. The space felt larger somehow with him gone, emptier in a way that had nothing to do with physical presence. She told herself it was simply because she had grown unaccustomed to company. Nothing more. The days that followed settled back into her usual routine. She checked her trap lines, hunted when game presented itself, and spent the long evenings by the fire working on various projects to pass the time. But she found her thoughts drifting often to gray eyes and a genuine smile, to the enthusiasm in Matthew's voice when he spoke of skating. Foolish. Dangerous. She forced herself to focus on survival, on making it through the winter, on not thinking about the human whose life she had saved. A week after their encounter, Kora returned from checking her snares to find a bundle waiting on her doorstep. Her heart hammered as she approached cautiously, spear ready, scanning the tree line for threats. But the forest was quiet and the bundle appeared to be alone. She nudged it with her foot, then crouched to examine it more closely. Inside the oiled cloth wrapping, she found a pair of ice skates. They were larger than Matthew's had been, the leather straps reinforced and lengthened, the blades slightly wider. A note accompanied them, written in surprisingly neat script. "For someone who has never tried. The lake is beautiful at sunset. Thank you for my life. M.N." Kora's hands trembled as she held the skates. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the leather soft and supple, the blades honed to perfect edges. These had not been made quickly. Matthew must have started work on them immediately after returning home, spending hours at the forge and leather bench to create something specifically for her build and weight. The gesture touched something deep inside her that she had thought long frozen. She brought the skates inside and set them on the rough wooden table, staring at them as though they might transform into something else if she looked away. What was she supposed to do with this? Accepting them felt like accepting something larger, acknowledging a connection that could only lead to pain for both of them. But rejecting them felt equally impossible, like spitting on a kindness freely given. That evening, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Kora found herself walking toward the lake with the skates tucked under one arm. She told herself she was merely testing them, that it would be wasteful to let such fine work go unused. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wanted to understand what Matthew had described, wanted to experience that feeling of flying he had spoken of with such joy. The lake stretched before her, a vast expanse of white ice painted orange and pink by the setting sun. She sat on a fallen log near the shore and examined the skates more closely. The binding seemed straightforward enough, though she fumbled with the unfamiliar fastenings. Eventually, she managed to secure them to her boots, pulled tight and triple-knotted for security. Standing proved to be an immediate challenge. Her ankles wanted to roll inward, the narrow blades offering none of the stability she was accustomed to. She grabbed a low-hanging branch for support, taking slow, shuffling steps toward the ice itself. This was ridiculous. She was a warrior, an orc woman who had brought down deer with her bare hands and faced down wolves without flinching. And here she was, defeated by strips of metal strapped to her feet. She stepped onto the ice and immediately regretted it. Her feet slid in different directions, her arms windmilled, and only her grip on the branch kept her from falling. Kora growled in frustration, her tusks catching the late afternoon light. Perhaps she should simply give up, return to her cabin and forget this foolishness. The trick is to keep your knees bent and your weight forward. She whipped around so fast she nearly did fall, barely catching herself. Matthew stood on the shore, his own skates dangling from one hand, an apologetic smile on his face. The bandage was gone from his head, though a healing cut still marked his temple. "You startled me," she said, her heart pounding for multiple reasons. "Sorry, I saw you from the ridge and thought, well, I thought you might want some help." He gestured at her death grip on the branch. "First time is always rough. I am fine. You look terrified." "I am not terrified, I am." Uncertain, his smile widened and there was no mockery in it, only warmth. "That's allowed. Everyone is uncertain their first time. Here, let me show you." He sat on the log to don his own skates, movements practiced and efficient. Then he glided onto the ice with an ease that seemed impossible, moving backward to face her without apparent effort. He extended both hands toward her. "Trust me." That was the question, was it not? Trust. The thing that existed between their peoples only as an absence, a void filled with violence and fear. But he had trusted her when he woke in her cabin, had drunk her broth and accepted her help, despite every reason not to. Kora released the branch and took his hands. His grip was firm and steady as he began to pull her gently away from the shore. "Keep those knees soft. Don't lock them or you'll fall for sure. And don't look at your feet. Look at me." She fixed her gaze on his face, seeing the concentration there, the genuine desire to help. Her skates scraped and stuttered across the ice, her weight shifting precariously with each movement. She clung to his hands like they were the only solid things in a melting world. "You're too tense," he said. "Try to relax." "Easy for you to say. You are not about to humiliate yourself." Everyone humiliates themselves learning to skate. I spent my first day on the ice falling on my backside so many times my mother had to sew a patch on my trousers. His eyes crinkled with amusement. "You're actually doing better than I did. You are lying to make me feel better." "Maybe a little, but you're also not giving yourself enough credit." They moved in slow circles near the shore, Matthew skating backward with unconscious grace while Kora shuffled and slipped. She fell twice despite his support, landing hard on the ice both times. But he helped her up with patient hands and encouraging words. never laughing at her struggles. The sun sank lower, painting the ice in shades of crimson and gold. Other skaters might have been on the lake earlier, but they had the space to themselves now. Two solitary figures on a canvas of light and shadow. Gradually, incrementally, Kora felt something shift in her understanding of the ice. Instead of fighting it, she began to work with it, letting the blades glide rather than forcing her steps. "There," Matthew said, his face breaking into a genuine grin. "You're getting it," and she was. Not graceful yet, not by any measure, but moving under her own power, her strokes becoming longer and more confident. She released one of his hands experimentally, then the other, and managed 3 full pushes before her balance wavered and she grabbed for him again. "Sorry," she muttered. "Don't be, that was good, really good." His hands remained on hers even though she had stabilized. "Want to try actually skating, not just shuffling but really moving?" Fear and exhilaration warred in her chest. "I will fall. Probably, but you'll get back up." He squeezed her hands gently. "Come on, I'll stay right beside you." They started slowly, Matthew matching his pace to hers, calling out encouragement and corrections as they went. "Bend your knees more. Push from the side, not straight back. Let the blade do the work." His voice became a steady anchor as she found her rhythm, and suddenly, miraculously, she was skating. Truly skating, not just surviving on the ice but moving across it with purpose and gathering speed. The wind caught her hair, cold and sharp against her face. The world did fall away, just as Matthew had promised, narrowing to the scrape of blades on ice, the rhythm of her breathing, the perfect smoothness of the surface beneath her. She laughed, the sound bursting from her chest unbidden, joyous and free. "Told you," Matthew called, skating beside her with easy confidence. "It's like flying." They completed a circuit of the lake, or at least the portion of it where the ice was thickest and safest. Kora's legs burned with the unfamiliar effort, her ankles aching from maintaining balance, but she felt more alive than she had in months. When they finally slowed near the shore where they had started, the sun had nearly completed its descent, the sky fading from orange to purple. "Thank you," she said, slightly breathless. "For the skates, for this. You saved my life. Teaching you to skate seems like the least I could do." He hesitated, then asked, "Will you come again? To skate, I mean. The ice should hold for another month at least." She should say no. Should recognize this for the dangerous path it was. But instead she found herself nodding. "Perhaps, if time allows, tomorrow at sunset." His eagerness was almost endearing. "I could bring food, make an evening of it, Matthew. I know it's complicated, dangerous even." His expression turned serious. "But no one comes to the lake at dusk in winter. It's too cold, too dark coming on. We'd be alone, and I." He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "I would like to see you again. Is that strange? Very strange." But Kora felt the corners of her mouth tugging upward despite herself. "Your people and mine are enemies. Then maybe we can be the exception." It was naive, perhaps even foolish. But standing there on the ice with the last light of day painting the world in impossible colors, Kora found herself wanting to believe in exceptions, in possibilities that existed outside the rigid boundaries their societies had constructed. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "At sunset." His answering smile could have lit the gathering darkness. They parted ways at the shore, each heading toward their respective homes through the winter forest. Kora's legs trembled with exhaustion by the time she reached her cabin, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in years. She lay awake long into the night, the skates placed carefully beside her pallet, wondering what exactly she had agreed to and whether she would come to regret it. But when the next evening arrived and the sun began its descent, she found herself walking toward the lake again, anticipation building in her chest like a physical thing. Matthew was already there, building a small fire in a sheltered spot near the shore. He looked up as she approached, his face breaking into that smile that made something flutter strangely in her stomach. "You came." "I said I would. I know, but I wasn't entirely sure." He gestured at the fire, at the bundle of supplies beside it. "I brought food, nothing fancy. Bread and cheese and some dried apple." They shared the simple meal, sitting close to the fire's warmth as the cold evening air settled around them. The conversation flowed more easily now, moving from safe topics like the weather and the quality of the ice to more personal territories. Matthew told her about his family, his father's forge, his mother's insistence that he find a wife soon. Kora spoke of her clan's traditions, the hunts she had participated in, the reason she had come to question the endless cycle of violence. "You miss them?" Matthew asked. "Your people?" "Sometimes. Mostly I miss my sister. She is, younger than me, still learning her way." Kora stared into the flames. "I wonder if she thinks of me, if she understands why I spoke up. Maybe she will someday, maybe they all will, perhaps." But Kora did not truly believe it. Her clan had made their choice, and she had made hers. There was no going back. They skated as the last light faded, and this time Kora found her confidence growing more quickly. She still clutched Matthew's arm when her balance wavered, still moved with less grace than him, but the ice felt less foreign now, more welcoming. They skated in comfortable silence, the scrape of their blades the only sound besides the wind in the bare trees, and so it became a pattern. Each evening as the sun descended toward the horizon, they met at the lake. Matthew brought food, Kora brought her growing confidence and skill on the ice. They talked and laughed and skated together, while the winter sky turned through its nightly performance of colors. He taught her to skate backward, to turn sharply, to stop without falling or grabbing for support. She learned the particular music of the ice, the way it sang differently depending on temperature and wind, the subtle variations in texture that signaled weak spots to avoid. "You're a natural," Matthew said one evening after she completed a particularly smooth turn. "I think you're better than me now, lies and flattery." But she felt herself preening slightly at the praise. "I'm serious. Look." He demonstrated his own turn, deliberately clumsy. "See, terrible form." "That was intentionally bad and you know it." He laughed, the sound carrying across the frozen expanse. "Maybe, but you really have improved incredibly. I'm running out of things to teach you." The thought should have pleased her, but instead, Kora felt a strange pang of loss. What would happen when there was nothing left to teach, when she no longer needed his guidance? Would they stop meeting? Would this strange, fragile friendship simply dissolve like spring ice? As if sensing her thoughts, Matthew skated closer. "We could still meet, though. Even after you've mastered skating, if you wanted." "Why?" The question came out more blunt than she intended. "Why risk this? Your family would be horrified if they knew. Your community would shun you at best." "My father wouldn't, I told you. He believes in peace between our peoples." Matthew's expression turned thoughtful. "And as for why, because you're interesting, because talking to you is the best part of my day, because when I'm with you the world makes more sense somehow." "That is the opposite of sense," Kora pointed out, but her voice lacked conviction. "We should not work, should not even be friends." "Probably not, but here we are anyway." Here they were indeed. Two people from warring cultures meeting in secret to skate on a frozen lake as winter deepened around them. It was absurd, dangerous. And yet Kora found she would not trade these evenings for anything. The weeks flowed one into another. The ice grew thicker, the days shorter, the cold more bitter. Kora's skill on the skates progressed from competent to genuinely good. She no longer needed to cling to Matthew's arm for support. Instead, they skated side by side, matching their rhythms, sometimes racing, sometimes simply gliding in peaceful silence. But she noticed she still reached for his hand sometimes, even when balance was not in question. Notice the way his fingers would close around hers without hesitation, warm despite the cold. Notice the way her heart would skip when he smiled at her, or said her name in that particular tone that seemed reserved just for her. This was becoming something more than friendship, and they both knew it. The knowledge hung between them unspoken, a secret they kept even from themselves. One evening, nearly a month after their first skating lesson, Kora arrived at the lake to find Matthew pacing nervously near the fire. His agitation was visible even from a distance, and she quickened her pace, worry spiking through her. "What is wrong?" He turned to face her, and she could see the distress written clearly on his features. "There's going to be a raid. My cousin overheard the militia planning it. 3 days from now they're going to attack your clan's winter camp." The words hit like a physical blow. Her sister, her people. Despite their rejection of her, despite everything, they were still her blood. "Why? What provoked this? Does it matter?" Matthew's hands clenched into fists. "They've been planning it for weeks apparently, waiting for the moon to wane so they'll have darkness to cover their approach." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Kora, you have to warn them. They will not listen to me. I am outcast. But they're your people. Your sister is there." "I know." Her mind raced, calculating distances and timing. 3 days. It could be done if she traveled without pause, but what reception would await her? Would they even let her enter the camp, let alone heed her warnings? "This is dangerous for you if your people discover you told me." "I don't care." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "I won't stand by and let innocents be slaughtered, orc or human. That's not who I am." Looking at him in the firelight, Kora felt something crack open inside her chest, some final wall she had been maintaining crumbling to dust. This man, this human who should have been her enemy, was risking his own safety to protect her people. The magnitude of it, the sheer goodness, overwhelmed her. "I will go," she said. "Tonight I cannot wait. I'll come with you." "No." She touched his face without thinking, her palm rough against his skin. "You have done enough, more than enough. This is my task, Kora. Please." She let her hand drop. "If anything happened to you because of me, I could not bear it." The admission hung in the cold air between them, more revealing than any declaration. Matthew's expression softened, and he caught her hand, pressing it back against his cheek. "Then come back. Promise me you'll come back." "I promise." They stood there for a moment longer, hands joined, the evening wind whipping around them. Then Kora pulled away, knowing if she did not leave now she never would. She removed her skates and handed them to Matthew. "Keep these safe for me." "I will." His voice was rough with emotion. "Be careful." "Always." She turned and ran, letting her orc strength and stamina carry her through the darkening forest at a pace no human could match. Behind her, she imagined she could feel Matthew's gaze following, though the trees had long since blocked all sight of the lake. Her heart ached with each step, a pain she had not anticipated and did not fully understand. The journey to her clan's winter camp took the entire night and half the next day. Kora ran until her lungs burned and her legs trembled, then walked until she could run again, driving herself with merciless determination. She knew the camp's location, had scouted it weeks ago, though she had not approached. Now she followed half-remembered landmarks through the snow-covered wilderness, praying she was not too late. She reached the camp's perimeter as the sun climbed toward its zenith, and immediately 2 sentries stepped from concealment, spears leveled at her chest. They recognized her, she could see it in their eyes, but recognition did not breed welcome. "Kora." The larger of the two guards, a male named Dirk who had once hunted alongside her, spoke with cold formality. "You are not permitted here. I must speak with the war chief. There is danger." "The only danger is you. Leave before we make you leave, please." She hated the begging note in her voice but could not suppress it. "The humans plan to attack in 2 days. I have information that could save lives." The guards exchanged glances. Finally, the second one, a young female named Yara, said, "Wait here. I will ask." She disappeared into the camp while Dirk maintained his hostile vigil. Kora stood in the snow, her breath forming clouds in the cold air, and waited. Minutes stretched like hours. She became aware of other orcs watching from within the camp, faces she recognized, people she had grown up alongside. None showed any warmth, any welcome. She had broken the ultimate rule by questioning their leader, and they would not soon forgive it. Eventually, Yara returned with the war chief himself. Grak was a massive orc, scarred and grizzled, who had led their clan for 15 years through constant conflict with the humans. He looked at Kora with eyes like chips of flint. "Speak." She outlined what Matthew had told her, omitting only his name and how she had come by the information. The war chief listened without expression, his face unreadable. When she finished, silence stretched for several heartbeats. "Why should I believe you?" Grak asked finally. "You who spoke against your own people, you who valued human life over orc blood. Because it is the truth. Because regardless of our differences, I do not wish to see our clan destroyed. Or perhaps this is a trick. Perhaps you have been turned by the humans, sent here to spread false warnings so we relax our guard. That is not enough." His voice cracked like a whip. "You were exiled, Kora. You have no voice here, no right to counsel or warn. We will judge the truth of threats ourselves." He turned to the guards. "Escort her beyond our boundaries. If she returns, kill her. But the information is likely false. And even if true, we are prepared for human treachery. We are always prepared." Grak stepped closer, looming over her despite her own considerable height. "You made your choice when you spoke against me. Live with it. Alone." There was no arguing with that tone, no room for negotiation. Kora allowed the guards to march her back beyond the camp's perimeter, her mind churning with futile anger and fear. She had tried. She had risked rejection and worse to warn them, and they had dismissed her out of pride and prejudice. Now people would die, her sister among them potentially, and there was nothing more she could do. Or was there? An idea began to form as she trudged back toward her cabin. Dangerous, probably foolish, but possible. If the orcs would not heed her warning, perhaps she could warn the humans instead. Not to help them in their attack, but to prevent the attack altogether. If she could convince Matthew's father or whoever led the militia that the orcs were prepared, that they knew the attack was coming, perhaps the humans would call it off. A battle avoided benefited both sides, saved lives on both sides. She changed course, angling toward the human settlement Matthew had pointed out to her, the one with the wishbone oak. It took another few hours of hard travel, and the sun was descending toward evening when she finally approached the outskirts of the village. Her green skin and obvious orc features would cause immediate alarm, possibly violence, but she had to try. As it turned out, she did not need to venture into the settlement proper. A figure detached itself from the shelter of the split oak tree, and she recognized Matthew even before he called her name. "Kora, thank God." He ran toward her through the snow, heedless of anyone who might be watching. "I was so worried. Did you reach them? Did they listen?" "They did not believe me. The war chief thinks it is a trick." Matthew's face fell. "Then we have to stop the raid another way. If I go to the militia leaders, tell them, how will you explain your knowledge?" Kora interrupted gently. "They will want to know your source." Will you tell them about me? About our meetings? He opened his mouth, then closed it, the reality of the situation clearly sinking in. There has to be something we can do. There might be. If I can speak to your father, to whoever plans this attack, and make them understand that the orcs are prepared, they might reconsider. A battle against a prepared enemy is very different from a surprise raid. That could work. Matthew grabbed her hand. Come on, my father is at home. He's not part of the militia himself, but he knows the leaders. He can arrange a meeting. Matthew, if I walk into your village openly, there will be panic, violence. Not if you're with me, not if I vouch for you. His jaw set with determination. Trust me, there was that word again. Trust. It seemed to be the foundation of whatever they were building together, this impossible connection across the divide of their peoples. Kora nodded, and they walked together toward the cluster of buildings that marked the edge of human habitation. The reaction was predictable. Shouts of alarm, people scrambling for weapons, mothers pulling children inside. Matthew raised his voice, calling for calm, positioning himself between Kora and the gathering crowd. She stood straight, trying to appear non-threatening despite her tusks and green skin, her warrior's build and the scars that marked her arms. An older man pushed through the crowd, and Kora saw immediately where Matthew had gotten his features. Same strong jaw, same gray eyes, though these were lined with age and experience. He looked at Kora, then at his son, and his expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and finally a strange kind of understanding. Matthew, what is this? Father, this is Kora. She saved my life when I fell on the ice, and now she's trying to save many more lives, human and orc both. Matthew quickly outlined the situation, the planned raid, Kora's failed attempt to warn her clan. Marcus Norris listened carefully, his weathered face thoughtful. When Matthew finished, he turned to Kora. Why warn us? Your people rejected you, but you're still orc. Why help humans who have killed your kin? Because killing is all we have known, Kora said quietly. Your people and mine, we trade violence like merchants trade goods. It is endless and pointless, and I am tired of it. She met his gaze steadily. I do not want more death, not yours, not mine, so I am here to tell you that the raid will fail. My people know it is coming. They are prepared. Many humans will die if you proceed. How do you know about the raid? A new voice, harsh and suspicious. A heavy-set man with a scarred face pushed forward. No one outside the militia knew the timing. I told her. Matthew's voice rang clear. I overheard the planning and I told her. The crowd's murmur turned ugly. Someone shouted, traitor. Another voice called for Matthew to be arrested, but Marcus raised his hand and gradually the noise subsided. My son is no traitor. He is trying to prevent a massacre. Marcus turned to the scarred man. Captain Hendricks, you know me. You know I have never shied from necessary conflict. But is this conflict necessary? If the orcs know we're coming, if they're prepared, do we really want to throw our men's lives away? The orc could be lying, Hendricks said, but his tone had shifted from hostile to calculating. Trying to save her people by making us afraid. I gain nothing from lying, Kora said. My people cast me out. They threatened to kill me if I returned. I am here because I believe both sides can benefit from avoiding this battle. And if we call off the raid, what guarantee do we have that the orcs won't attack us instead? None. Just as I have no guarantee they won't attack regardless. Kora straightened to her full height. I can only tell you the truth as I know it. What you do with that truth is your choice. Hendricks looked like he wanted to argue further, but Marcus stepped in. Let's call a meeting. Full militia leadership. We'll discuss this properly, weigh all considerations. He looked at Kora. Will you wait, answer questions? If it will help prevent bloodshed, yes. The meeting was held in the village's largest building, a combination community hall and church. Kora stood before the assembled militia leaders, an orc woman alone among humans who had every reason to hate her kind, and answered their questions with patience and dignity. Some were hostile, others merely suspicious, but Marcus and Matthew both spoke in her defense, vouching for her character and intentions. The debate stretched for hours. Arguments for and against the raid were made with passion and occasional anger. But gradually, pragmatism won out over pride. A raid against a prepared enemy would cost lives they could not afford to lose, and winter was no time for costly battles. The militia leaders voted narrowly to postpone the attack, to send scouts instead to verify Kora's claims before committing to action. It was not perfect, not a true peace, but it was enough. Enough to save lives in the immediate term, enough to give both sides time to reconsider their positions. As the meeting broke up and people filed out into the night, Matthew found Kora where she stood near the back of the hall. "You did it." "We did it." She felt exhausted, hollowed out by the stress and fear of the past day. "But it is only temporary. Eventually there will be another raid, another battle. Maybe, or maybe this is a start, a first step toward something better." He took her hand, bold now despite the people still present. "Come home with me. Stay the night at least. You're dead on your feet." She wanted to argue, but the truth was she did not have the energy for the journey back to her cabin. And the thought of sleeping somewhere warm, somewhere safe, was overwhelmingly appealing. "Your father will not mind," I already asked him. "He said you're welcome in our home." The Norris homestead was modest but well kept, the kind of place that spoke of honest work and practical comfort. Marcus's wife, Catherine, met them at the door. She took one look at Kora and, to her credit, only hesitated a moment before stepping aside to let her enter. "You'll be hungry," she said simply. "Both of you, sit. I'll heat stew." The meal was hearty and filling, and the simple domesticity of it, the warmth of the fire and the quiet conversation, affected Kora deeply. This was what people could have, human and orc alike, if they could just stop fighting long enough to see each other as something other than enemies. Family. Home. Peace. She slept in their guest room, a small space that had probably been Matthew's before he had moved to his own cottage on the property. The bed was softer than her pallet, the blankets warmer than her furs. But despite her exhaustion, sleep came slowly. She lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that had changed. Morning arrived with pale winter sunlight and the smell of cooking oatmeal. Kora joined the family for breakfast, and the conversation was slightly less stilted than dinner had been. Catherine asked polite questions about orc customs, and Marcus discussed the scout reports that would determine whether the militia honored their agreement to postpone the raid. "You should know," Marcus said as they were finishing the meal, "there are people in the village who are not happy about this, who see you as a threat or a trick. I understand. I just mean be careful, both of you." He looked between Kora and Matthew with a father's knowing gaze. "Whatever is developing between you, it's going to face opposition from both sides." "Father, we're just—" Matthew started, but Marcus waved him off. "I'm not blind, son, and I'm not judging, but I am warning. This path you're choosing, it's not an easy one." After breakfast, Kora prepared to leave. Matthew insisted on walking her back toward her cabin, despite her protests that she knew the way. They traveled in silence for a while, winding through the forest as the morning sun climbed higher. "Thank you," Matthew said finally, "for everything you did. For risking yourself to warn both sides. I did what I felt was right. I know, that's what makes you." He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "Remarkable. What makes you remarkable?" Kora felt heat rise in her cheeks, a blush invisible beneath her green skin but no less real. "I am not remarkable, I am simply tired of death." "Then we have that in common." They reached the lake, and by unspoken agreement both stopped. The ice stretched before them, pristine and inviting in the morning light. Matthew looked at her, a question in his eyes. "One quick circuit?" he asked. Before you go, she should refuse. Should return to her cabin and let things return to whatever normal they had been before. But instead, she found herself nodding, and together they retrieved their skates from where Matthew had stored them in a hollow tree near the shore. The ice welcomed them like an old friend. Kora pushed off and immediately found her rhythm, her body remembering the motions she had practiced over so many evenings. Matthew glided beside her, and they circled the lake together in the clear morning air. But something felt different. Maybe it was everything that had happened in the past 2 days, all the fear and danger and raw emotion. Maybe it was simply that they had stopped pretending what was growing between them was mere friendship. Whatever the reason, when they slowed near the center of the lake and Matthew reached for her hand, Kora did not hesitate to take it. "I need to tell you something," Matthew said, his gray eyes serious. "I've been trying to find the right words, the right time, but I don't think there is a right time for this. Matthew, please, let me say this." He took a breath. "That first day when I woke up in your cabin, I was terrified. Not just of you being an orc, but of what it meant that you had saved me. It challenged everything I thought I knew about your people, about the world, I remember. And then we started meeting here, and I told myself it was just to teach you to skate, that it was just repaying a debt. But somewhere along the way it became more." His hands tightened on hers. "You became more. And now I can't imagine not seeing you, can't imagine my days without these evenings, can't imagine a future without you in it." Kora's heart hammered against her ribs. "You know what you are saying. You know what it would mean, I know. Exile from my people probably, certainly ostracism, but Kora." He drew her closer. "You're worth it. Whatever comes, you're worth it. I am orc. You are human. It is impossible. Lots of things are impossible until someone does them." A small smile tugged at his mouth. Like orc women learning to skate. Despite everything, she laughed. "That is not the same thing, isn't it? Both seemed impossible until we tried." He was close enough now that she could see the individual flecks of color in his gray eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath in the cold air. Her tusks ached with tension as she worried at her lower lip, torn between desire and practicality. "If we do this," she said quietly, "there is no going back for either of us. I know." His hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture achingly tender. "I'm not asking for easy, Kora, I'm just asking for you." She closed the remaining distance and kissed him. It was awkward at first, her tusks making the angle strange, their inexperience with each other obvious. But then they found their rhythm, just as they had on the ice, and the kiss deepened into something that made Kora's knees weak for reasons that had nothing to do with skating. Matthew's arms came around her, pulling her close, and she surrendered to the embrace, to the impossible rightness of it despite every reason it should be wrong. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kora rested her forehead against his. "This is madness." "Complete madness," he agreed. "Do you want to stop?" "No." The admission came easily, honestly. "But we must be careful. Your people, my father knows, and he approves or at least doesn't disapprove. My mother will take more convincing, but she'll come around. And mine." Kora pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "My clan will never accept this. If they discover I am with a human, they will hunt us both. Then we'll be careful. We'll keep meeting here in secret until we can figure something else out." Matthew stroked her cheek with his thumb. "I'm not giving you up, not for them, not for anyone." The fierce certainty in his voice made something bloom warm and bright in her chest. You are very stubborn. You have no idea. He kissed her again, softer this time, lingering. But first, there's something else we need to do. What? Race. We never actually determined who's the better skater. The absurdity of it, of moving from declarations of love to competition in the span of a heartbeat, made Kora laugh again. You are ridiculous. Maybe, but you're smiling. She was indeed. They lined up side by side and, on Matthew's count, pushed off together. It was not a long race, just a circuit of the lake, but they both gave it everything they had. Kora felt her muscles burn, her breath come hard, but she poured all her orc strength and speed into the effort. She won by a length, crossing their impromptu finish line with a triumphant whoop. Matthew glided up beside her, barely winded, grinning like a fool. I let you win, he claimed. Lies. Okay, you won, but in my defense, you've got an unfair advantage with those orc muscles. Are you calling me muscular? Very. It's extremely attractive. They spent another hour on the ice, racing and playing, skating together and apart. It felt like a reprieve from the weight of the world, a space where they could simply be together without the complications of their respective peoples and histories. But eventually, the sun climbed high enough that they could no longer ignore the day's demands. They parted at the forest edge with a kiss and a promise to meet again at sunset. Kora returned to her cabin feeling lighter than she had in months, despite the challenges ahead. She had found something precious and unexpected in Matthew, something worth protecting and fighting for. The days that followed settled into a new pattern. They met each evening at the lake, weather permitting, and spent their time skating and talking and discovering each other. Matthew told her about his dreams of expanding his father's forge, of developing new techniques for metalwork. Kora spoke of her hopes that maybe, someday, their peoples might find a real peace, but they were not naive about the obstacles. Reports came through various channels that the orc clan remained hostile, that only the winter cold prevented renewed aggression. And in Matthew's village, sentiment against orcs ran strong, fed by generations of conflict and fresh grievances. One evening, about 2 weeks after their first kiss, Matthew arrived at the lake looking troubled. Kora skated up to him, immediately concerned. What is wrong, Captain Hendricks? He's been asking questions about me, about where I go in the evenings, who I've been talking to. Matthew's jaw clenched. I think he suspects about us. Then we should stop meeting, at least for a while. No. The word came out sharp and definitive. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm tired of pretending this is something to be ashamed of. Matthew, be reasonable. If your people discover, I don't care. He took her hands. Kora, I've been thinking, what if we left, both of us? We could go somewhere neither of our peoples has claimed, start fresh. The suggestion stunned her. Leave everything behind, venture into unknown territory, just the two of them. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. That would be difficult, but possible. We're both strong, resourceful. We could build a life together, away from all this conflict. Running away solves nothing. Our peoples will still be at war, but we won't be dying in it. His expression turned pleading. Don't you want that? A future where we don't have to hide, where we can just be together? She did want it, more than she had allowed herself to admit. Where would we go? There are territories to the west, unclaimed lands beyond the frontier. We could. A shout cut through the evening air. Both of them turned to see figures emerging from the tree line, humans carrying torches and weapons. At their head was Captain Hendricks, his scarred face twisted with anger. There, he called. I told you, the Norris boy with an orc, consorting with the enemy. Matthew moved to stand between Kora and the approaching militia, his body tense. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like betrayal, Hendricks spat. That creature there, she's been spying on us, using you to gather information. That's not true. Kora saved my life. She warned us about the raid. A convenient story. More likely she fed us false information to make us lower our guard. The captain gestured to his men. Seize them both. The militiamen advanced, and Kora's warrior instincts surged to the forefront. She could fight, could probably take down several of them before they overwhelmed her. But that would only prove their prejudices correct, would paint her as the savage they expected. Please, she said, hating how weak the words sounded, we have done nothing wrong. You exist, that's wrong enough. Hendricks leveled a crossbow at her chest. On your knees, orc. No. Matthew's voice rang out clear and defiant. You want her, you go through me first. Matthew, don't, Kora whispered urgently. Your life, your family mean nothing if I lose you. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw absolute certainty. I choose you, I will always choose you. The declaration hung in the cold air. Kora felt tears prick her eyes, an unfamiliar sensation. No one had ever chosen her before. Her clan had cast her out at the first disagreement. But this human man was willing to face down his own people, to risk everything for her. How touching. Hendricks's voice dripped with scorn. Take them both then. The boy can share the orc cell while we decide what to do with them. The militiamen surged forward. Kora grabbed Matthew's hand and made a split-second decision. She pulled him onto the ice, skating backward with rapid strokes, using her hard-won skill to put distance between them and their pursuers. Kora, what are you doing? Giving us a chance. She pulled him faster, her powerful legs driving them across the frozen surface. Behind them, the militiamen hesitated at the ice's edge. Few of them would have skates, and pursuing on foot across the ice would be treacherous. But Hendricks was not so easily deterred. Get boats, cut them off at the far shore. Kora changed direction, angling for the southern bank where the forest grew thick. If they could reach the trees, they could lose their pursuers in the wilderness. Matthew skated beside her, matching her pace, and together they flew across the ice with a speed and grace born of weeks of practice. They reached the southern shore well ahead of their pursuers and scrambled up the bank, fingers fumbling with frozen laces to remove their skates. Behind them, shouts echoed across the lake as the militiamen organized their pursuit. Kora grabbed Matthew's hand and plunged into the forest. Her orc vision served them well in the gathering darkness, allowing her to navigate through the dense growth while Matthew stumbled behind her. She led them deeper into the wilderness, away from any trail or landmark she recognized, focused only on distance and concealment. Finally, when her lungs burned and even Matthew's determination was flagging, she found a fallen log covered in snow. They collapsed behind it, chests heaving, listening for sounds of pursuit. But the forest was silent except for the wind in the bare branches. I think. We lost them, Matthew gasped. For now. Kora's mind raced, calculating their options. They had no supplies, no shelter, and night was falling fast. The temperature would drop dangerously low. We need to find protection from the cold. I know a place. An old trapper's cabin, maybe an hour north of here. My father showed it to me years ago. Can you find it in the dark? I think so, if we follow the ridge line. They set off again, moving more carefully now. Matthew led this time, his knowledge of the terrain guiding them through the winter forest. Kora stayed close, her senses alert for any sign of their pursuers, though she heard nothing but their own passage through the snow. True to his word, Matthew found the cabin as full dark settled over the forest. It was smaller than Kora's place, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a hearth and a supply of dry wood stacked against one wall. They built a fire quickly, and the small space warmed rapidly. Only once the immediate danger of freezing had passed did they allow themselves to truly process what had happened. They sat side by side near the fire, shoulders touching, hands clasped. "I am sorry," Kora said quietly. "You have lost everything because of me." "I haven't lost everything. I still have you." Matthew squeezed her hand. "That's what matters. Your family will understand. My father will at least, and the others." "Well, I meant what I said. I choose you." Kora turned to look at him, seeing the firelight paint his features in shades of gold and shadow. "We cannot go back now, either of us. No, so we go forward instead." He pulled her closer. "To those western territories I mentioned, we start fresh, build a life together. It will be hard. Everything worth having is hard." He kissed her forehead. "Besides, I've got you. An orc woman who learned to skate in less than a month. I think we can handle whatever comes." Despite everything, Kora smiled. "You are impossible. You keep saying that. I'm starting to think you like impossible." "I like you. Good, because you're stuck with me now." They spent the night in the cabin, taking turns keeping watch though no pursuit materialized. In the morning, they discussed their plans. West was indeed their best option, away from both human settlements and orc territories. They would need supplies, but Kora's cabin lay in that general direction, and they could gather what they needed there. The journey back to her place took most of the day, both of them moving cautiously and watching for any sign of searchers. But the forest remained quiet, and by afternoon they reached the familiar shelter of Kora's home. Inside, everything was as she had left it. Her meager possessions, her few treasures, the life she had built in exile. Strange how quickly it had become irrelevant, how readily she could imagine leaving it all behind for an uncertain future with Matthew. They gathered supplies methodically. Food, warm clothing, tools, weapons. Kora's hunting gear and Matthew's knife. Flint and steel for fire. A small pot for cooking. Everything carefully weighed against the need to travel light and fast. As they worked, Matthew noticed something on Kora's shelf. A small carving, crude but recognizable as an orc child. "Who is this, my sister? I made it years ago before." She trailed off. "I know I cannot return to my clan. No, they will never accept me, but I wanted something to remember her by. Bring it." Matthew tucked the carving carefully into his pack. Family is important, even when they don't understand. The gesture touched her deeply. This human man, who had lost his own family because of her, still recognized the value of those connections. "Thank you." They left at dusk, heading west into unknown territory. The journey would take weeks, possibly months depending on terrain and weather. But as they walked side by side through the snow-covered forest, Kora felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Hope. The first few days of travel were grueling. They kept to the wilderness, avoiding any settlements or established trails. The winter landscape was unforgiving, and they rationed their supplies carefully, supplementing with game when Kora could hunt. Matthew's knowledge of edible plants and shelter building complemented her tracking and hunting skills. They made a good team. At night, they huddled together for warmth, and the physical closeness bred an emotional intimacy that deepened their bond. They talked about everything and nothing. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Matthew told her about learning metalwork at his father's side, the satisfaction of creating something useful with his own hands. Kora spoke of her first hunt, the pride she had felt bringing down a deer to feed her family. "You think they will look for us?" she asked one night as they lay beneath a shared blanket, the fire burning low. "Your people or mine? Either. Both." Matthew was quiet for a moment. "Maybe at first, but we'll be far away soon. Beyond where either side typically ranges, we'll be safe. Safe." She tested the word, found it strange on her tongue. "I have never been truly safe. You will be, I promise." He pulled her closer. "We both will be." About a week into their journey, they crested a ridge and saw it, a vast expanse of wilderness stretching to the horizon, untouched and unclaimed. Territory that belonged to neither human nor orc, land they could make their own. "There," Matthew said, pointing. "That's where we're going." They descended into the new territory with growing excitement. The land was rich with game sign, the forests thick with valuable timber. A river cut through the valley below, promising fresh water and fish. It was perfect. They spent several days exploring, finally selecting a site for their homestead near the river where the ground was relatively flat, and trees provided wind protection. Then began the hard work of building a life. Matthew proved skilled with an axe, felling trees and shaping logs. Kora's strength allowed her to move timber that would have required multiple humans. Together, they constructed a small cabin, rough but sturdy, with a proper hearth and chimney. It was exhausting work that left them sore and tired each night, but also deeply satisfying. As the walls went up, so too did their sense of permanence. This was not temporary shelter. This was home. Their home, built with their own hands, beholden to no one but themselves. One evening, as they sat outside admiring their work, Matthew turned to Kora. "Marry me," she blinked, certain she had misheard. "What, marry me? I know there's no priest here, no witnesses, but I don't care. I want to pledge myself to you properly, want you to be my wife. I am orc." "You are human. We already are," he interrupted gently. "We've built a home together, committed to a future together. This is just making it official." Kora's throat felt tight. "My people have marriage rituals, vows exchanged before the clan, bonds tied with ceremonial cord." "Then teach me. We'll do it properly, your way and mine combined." They spent the next day preparing. Kora braided a ceremonial cord from hemp fiber, weaving in her clan's traditional patterns, though no orc would witness it. Matthew carved 2 rings from a single piece of oak, simple but meaningful. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink reminiscent of that first evening by the lake, they stood facing each other before their new home. "In my people's tradition," Kora said, her voice thick with emotion, "marriage is a bond of strength and trust, a promise to stand together against all threats, to share burdens and joys equally." She wrapped the cord loosely around their joined hands. "I vow to be your shield when danger comes, your partner in all things, your mate until death separates us." "In my people's tradition," Matthew said, "marriage is a covenant before God and community, a promise to love and honor, to cherish and protect." He slipped one of the wooden rings onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. "I vow to love you without reservation, to support your dreams and share your struggles, to be your husband in this life and whatever comes after." They tightened the cord together, binding their hands, and kissed as the last light faded from the sky. There were no witnesses but the forest, no blessing but their own conviction. Yet Kora had never felt anything more sacred, more right. That night they consummated their marriage in their new home, and it was fumbling and sweet and perfect. Afterward, lying in each other's arms with the fire burning low, Kora felt a peace she had never known. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For choosing me. For believing we could have this." Matthew kissed her forehead. "Best decision I ever made." Winter gradually gave way to early spring. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that promised fertility. They cleared a plot for a garden, and Matthew used his metalworking skills to fashion crude but functional tools from salvaged iron and river stones. Kora's hunting kept them fed while they established their homestead. One morning, as Kora returned from checking snares, she found Matthew standing at the edge of their clearing, staring east toward the lands they had left behind. She approached quietly, touching his shoulder. "Thinking of home, thinking of my family." wondering if they worry if they hate me for leaving. He turned to face her. Do you ever regret it, coming here with me? Never. The word came without hesitation. Do you? No, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss them sometimes, miss knowing they were safe. Kora understood. She too carried that ache, the knowledge that her sister remained in the orc camp, unaware of what had become of her. Perhaps when we are more established we could send word. Let them know we are safe, that we are happy. Maybe, someday. He pulled her close. For now, this is enough. You are enough. Spring progressed into early summer. Their garden grew, promising future abundance. Matthew set up a small forge and began crafting proper tools, hooks for fishing, and eventually a set of hinges for a proper door. Kora tanned hides and sewed clothing, her skills improving with practice. They fell into comfortable rhythms, each day bringing new challenges and new accomplishments. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing the cabin's roof, Matthew suddenly pointed toward the southern ridge. Smoke. Kora followed his gaze and saw it too, a thin column rising above the trees perhaps a mile away. Smoke meant people, and people meant potential danger. Could be travelers, Matthew said, but his tone was uncertain, or scouts, from either of our peoples. Kora climbed down from the roof. We should investigate, carefully. They approached cautiously, using Kora's hunting skills to move through the forest unseen. As they drew closer, voices became audible, speaking in the guttural language of orcs. Kora's heart clenched. She gestured for Matthew to wait, then crept forward alone until she could see the camp. 3 orcs, all young males, sat around a fire. She recognized one of them, a cousin named Grak. They appeared to be hunting, their packs containing fresh game. But what were they doing so far west of clan territory? She was considering how to withdraw unseen when a branch snapped behind her. Matthew had followed despite her signal, and the noise alerted the orcs immediately. They leaped to their feet, weapons drawn, and Kora found herself exposed. Kora. Grak's eyes widened with shock. You live, I live. She stepped into view fully, positioning herself between the young orcs and where Matthew hid. What are you doing here? Hunting. The game near our winter camp has been poor. We ranged west seeking better territory. His eyes narrowed. The war chief said you were dead, cast out and surely perished. As you can see, I did not perish. One of the other orcs, a brute named Scar, growled low in his throat. You spoke against the war chief, betrayed the clan. I spoke for peace. That is not betrayal, peace with humans. It is the same thing. Scar's gaze swept the area, and Kora knew he was looking for signs of how she survived, whether she was alone. Where is your camp? That is not your concern. Another snap of branches, and Matthew emerged into view. He had clearly decided that hiding was pointless, that she would need his support. The young orcs reacted predictably, weapons rising, aggressive postures taken. A human, Scar spat. So it is true. You consort with the enemy. Matthew is my husband. He is no enemy. The declaration sent ripples of shock through the young orcs. Even Grak, who had always been relatively reasonable, looked appalled. You married a human. Kora, have you lost all honor? I have found more honor than I ever had with the clan. She felt Matthew move to stand beside her, felt his hand find hers. I have found peace, a life without constant violence. A life of shame, you mean? Scar took a step forward. The war chief will want to know about this, will want to know you still live, spreading your weakness. Then tell him I am happy, that I have no intention of returning or interfering with the clan's affairs. Kora squeezed Matthew's hand, drawing strength from his presence. Tell him I wish no conflict, only to be left in peace. You are outcast. You do not get to make demands. But Scar's aggression seemed to have lessened slightly, perhaps recognizing that attacking them would be more trouble than it was worth. Grak, to his credit, stepped between Scar and Kora. "Let them go. They are far from our territory, clearly not interfering. What purpose does conflict serve? The war chief is not here, and I do not think he will thank us for starting a fight we might not win." Grak looked at Kora meaningfully. She understood. He was giving them a chance, a grace period to disappear before the clan learned of their location. "Thank you, cousin," she said quietly. "Do not thank me, just go far from here, and do not let me find you again." They withdrew carefully, backing away until the trees concealed them, then moving quickly toward their homestead. Behind them, they heard the sounds of the orc camp being hastily dismantled. Grak would likely not report their location immediately, but Scar might convince him, or word might leak regardless. They had been discovered. "We need to move," Matthew said once they were safely home. "They know we're here now. Perhaps. Or perhaps Grak will keep his word and report us as simply gone, disappeared into the wilderness." But Kora knew it was wishful thinking. Scar's hostility had been clear. He would report what he had seen, and the war chief would send others. Either way, we should prepare, in case they come. Over the next several days, they worked to fortify their homestead. Matthew crafted a proper bar for the door and shutters for the windows. Kora established hidden supply caches in the forest, places they could flee to if the cabin became unsafe. They practiced escape routes and established signals for danger. But the attack, when it came, was not from orcs. Kora woke in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. Not the comforting smell of their hearth, but the acrid stench of their cabin burning. She shook Matthew awake, and they scrambled from bed, coughing, eyes streaming. Flames licked at the far wall, spreading rapidly along the dry logs. "Out!" Matthew grabbed their emergency pack and kicked open the door. They tumbled into the night and immediately found themselves surrounded. Human militiamen, a dozen strong, with Captain Hendricks at their head. His scarred face looked demonic in the firelight, twisted with satisfaction and hatred. "Thought you could hide," he called over the roar of the flames. "Thought we wouldn't find you." "How?" Matthew demanded, coughing. "Your father. The old fool let slip where you were heading, and we followed your trail west." Hendricks gestured at the burning cabin. "Pity about your little love nest, but it's an abomination anyway, human and orc together." "You have no right," Kora started, but Hendricks cut her off. "I have every right to destroy the orc that corrupted one of our own." He raised his crossbow. "Say goodbye to your monster, Norris. Maybe you'll thank me later when you've regained your senses." The crossbow fired. Matthew moved without thinking, throwing himself between Kora and the bolt. It took him in the shoulder, and he went down hard. Kora screamed, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands frantically checking the wound. Not fatal if treated quickly, but he was bleeding badly. Rage surged through her like nothing she had ever felt. These humans had destroyed their home, had shot the man she loved, all because they could not accept something different from their narrow worldview. Her vision went red, and she felt her muscles coil with deadly intent, but Matthew's hand found hers, gripping weakly. "Don't," he gasped. "They want you to attack, want an excuse to kill you." He was right. She could see it in Hendricks's stance, in the readiness of the other militiamen. They were hoping she would react with violence so they could end her without guilt, could tell themselves they had no choice. "Very touching," Hendricks said, reloading his crossbow. "But it changes nothing. The orc dies here." "No," a new voice, older and carrying authority. Marcus Norris emerged from the shadows, his face haggard but determined. "I cannot allow this, Captain. Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I came to find my son, to see if what people said about him was true." The older Smith looked at Matthew, at Kora, at the burning cabin. "And I see it is. He has chosen this orc as his mate. Then he's lost his mind. He's chosen love over hate." Marcus's voice cut like steel. Something I should have had the courage to do years ago, but I was afraid. Afraid of what people would say, what the cost would be. He moved to stand beside Kora and Matthew. I'm not afraid anymore. If you want to kill this orc woman, you'll have to kill me first. The standoff stretched for long moments. Hendricks looked genuinely torn, perhaps realizing that killing a respected community elder would have consequences he could not afford. Finally, he lowered his weapon. You're all mad. The world has gone mad. He spat into the dirt. Fine, keep your orc. But don't come crying to us when she betrays you, when her kind attack and she joins them. You're on your own. The militia withdrew, leaving them with the smoking remains of their cabin and Matthew's injury. Marcus knelt beside his son, examining the wound with experienced eyes. It's not too deep. Missed anything vital, but we need to clean and bind it quickly. Between the two of them, Kora and Marcus stabilized Matthew enough to move him to one of the supply caches Kora had established. It was merely a sheltered overhang with a small cave, but it was dry and hidden and safe. They built a small fire and Marcus cleaned the wound properly while Kora gathered herbs she knew would prevent infection. As they worked, Marcus asked quietly, "Are you happy? Truly?" Matthew, despite his pain, smiled. "More than I ever thought possible." "And you," Marcus looked at Kora, "my son, is he good to you?" "He is everything." The words came raw and honest. "He chose me when no one else would, saw past what I am to who I am. Then I was wrong to worry. Wrong to think this was some madness." Marcus clasped her shoulder, a gesture of acceptance. "Welcome to the family, daughter." The simple words, the genuine warmth in them, broke something loose in Kora's chest. She had not cried when her clan cast her out, had not shed tears over the loss of everything she had known. But now, accepted by this human man despite every reason to reject her, she felt moisture track down her green cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. They stayed in the cache for several days while Matthew healed. Marcus proved to be good company, telling stories of his youth and sharing techniques for metalwork with anyone who would listen. On the third day, as Matthew's fever broke and the wound began to heal cleanly, Marcus announced he needed to return home. "Your mother is worried sick, and I need to let people know you're alive and safe, even if they don't approve of how you're living." He looked at the charred remains of the cabin visible through the trees. "What will you do now?" "Rebuild," Matthew said immediately. "This is our home. We're not leaving." "Then you'll need tools, supplies." Marcus thought for a moment. "I can't bring them openly, but I could cache them at the halfway point. That old trapper's cabin where you sheltered before." "Father, you've done enough. We can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering." Marcus's expression was firm. "You're my son, and Kora is my daughter now. Family helps family." They parted ways with embraces and promises to meet again. Marcus headed east toward the settlement, while Kora and Matthew remained at their ruined homestead, planning their rebuild. It took all summer, but they reconstructed their cabin, this time with stone elements that would not burn easily. Matthew's shoulder healed, though he retained a scar that mirrored the one on his temple from the ice. "Matching set," he joked, though Kora did not find it particularly funny. True to his word, Marcus left supplies at regular intervals. Tools, nails, preserved food, even luxury items like coffee and sugar. Each cache included a note updating them on events in the settlement. The militia had fractured over the attack on Matthew and Kora, with many feeling Hendricks had gone too far. There was talk of opening trade negotiations with a nearby orc clan, though not Kora's original people. As autumn painted the forest in shades of red and gold, they completed their new cabin. It was larger than the first, with a proper sleeping loft and storage room. Matthew even managed to forge basic metalwork tools, allowing him to practice his craft in their wilderness home. One cool evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Kora said, "We should go back to the lake." Matthew looked at her in surprise. "The lake where we met? Yes, it has been a year now. Winter will come soon and the ice will form again." She took his hand. "I want to skate with you there, where it all began." It was dangerous, venturing back into territory claimed by both their peoples. But the pull of that place, of their beginning, was strong. They packed carefully and made the journey over several days, timing their arrival for late evening when the area would be deserted. The lake stretched before them, already starting to skim over with the first thin ice of the season. They made camp in the old site near the shore and settled in to wait for the freeze to fully take hold. It took 3 days. 3 days of hiding, of watching the ice slowly creep across the surface, of anticipating the moment they could skate together again. And finally, on the morning of the 4th day, Matthew tested the ice and pronounced it safe. They donned the skates Matthew had crafted, the ones that had started everything. Kora's fit perfectly still, the leather softened by use but still strong. They stepped onto the ice hand in hand, and immediately it felt like coming home. They skated together in the morning light, moving as one now after a year of partnership and love. Kora remembered that first terrified evening, clinging to Matthew's arm for dear life, certain she would humiliate herself. Now she pulled him across the lake, faster and faster, until they were both laughing breathlessly. "You've gotten too good," Matthew complained without heat. "I can't keep up anymore." "Then try harder." They raced, they played, they simply glided side by side as the sun climbed higher. It was everything Kora had remembered and more, made sweeter by the hard year they had endured to get back to this moment. As the sun reached its zenith, Matthew pulled her to a stop near the center of the lake. "I want to ask you something. You already married me. What more could you ask? I want to know if you're happy, truly happy, because this life we have, it's hard, isolated. We may never be fully accepted by either of our peoples." Kora cupped his face in her hands. "I am happy, happier than I ever imagined possible. Yes, it is hard. Yes, we are isolated, but I have you and that is enough. That will always be enough. Good, because I feel the same way." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Kora, my orc wife who learned to skate and stole my heart in the process. I love you too, my ridiculous human husband who saw past my tusks and my green skin to the person beneath." They skated until afternoon, until exhaustion finally forced them to stop. As they sat on the shore removing their skates, a sound made them both freeze. Footsteps. Multiple sets approaching from different directions. They looked up to find themselves surrounded, but this time it was not an attack. On one side stood Marcus with a handful of humans from the settlement. On the other stood Kora's sister, older now but unmistakable, with several young orcs from the clan. "Nara," Kora stood slowly, hardly daring to believe. "Sister." The young orc woman stepped forward. "I heard you were alive. I had to see for myself." They embraced, Kora's tears flowing freely now. "How did you know where to find me?" Grak told me, "after he saw you with the human. He kept your secret from the war chief, but he told me." Nara pulled back to look at Matthew. "This is your mate. This is Matthew, my husband." Nara studied him carefully, then nodded once. "He must be worthy if you chose him, if you gave up everything for him." "I gave up nothing that mattered." Kora looked between her sister and Marcus's group. "Why are you all here?" Marcus spoke up. "Because there are those among both our peoples who are tired of the fighting, who want to try something different." He gestured at the humans with him. "We've been talking to Nara and others like her, trying to find a path to peace." "It is slow," Nara admitted. "There is much hatred to overcome. But seeing you two, seeing that it is possible for human and orc to build a life together, it gives us hope." "We are not symbols," Kora protested. We are just two people trying to live. Sometimes that's all it takes, Marcus said quietly. Two people brave enough to choose love over hate, to show that another way is possible. The two groups mingled cautiously, and to Kora's amazement, there was no violence. Conversation was stilted and formal, but it was conversation. Humans and orcs speaking without weapons drawn, without hostility. It was a small thing, a fragile thing, but it was something. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in familiar shades of orange and gold, the groups separated. But before they left, Nara pulled Kora aside. The war chief is old, sick. He will not lead much longer. And when he is gone, things will change. She gripped Kora's hands. You may be able to come home if you wish. This is my home now. Kora looked at Matthew, who waited patiently nearby. Wherever he is, that is home. I understand, but know the option exists. Know that some of us never stopped loving you, never stopped missing you. They embraced again, and this time it felt like a true goodbye. Not bitter like before, but sweet. A closing of one chapter and the acknowledgement of new paths ahead. That night, Kora and Matthew made their camp one last time by the lake. They lay together under the stars, wrapped in furs and each other's warmth. "Do you think it will work?" Matthew asked quietly. "This peace they're trying to build, I do not know. Perhaps. Or perhaps it will fail and the fighting will continue." She kissed his temple, right over the scar from his fall. "But that is not our burden to carry. We have done our part simply by existing, by loving each other despite everything that said we should not. I suppose that's true." He pulled her closer. "Strange to think a year ago I was just a blacksmith's son, skating alone on this lake. And I was an outcast, alone in the forest, believing I would die that way. Funny how things work out. Funny is not the word I would use. What word would you use?" Kora thought about it, about the journey that had led them here, about the terror of that first evening on the ice, clinging to his arm for balance, about how by sunset of that first day she had been pulling him across the lake, confident and free, about everything that had come after, the hardships and the joys. "Miraculous," she said finally. "I would call it miraculous." Matthew laughed softly. "That works too." They fell asleep like that, tangled together under the vast expanse of stars. Two people from different worlds who had found their own world in each other. And when morning came, they packed up their camp and began the journey back to their homestead, to the life they had built together in the wilderness. The years that followed were not always easy. There were hard winters and failed crops, illnesses and injuries. But there were also good years, abundant harvests and comfortable winters. Marcus continued to visit regularly, eventually bringing Catherine, who slowly warmed to Kora. Nara came occasionally with news of the clan, of the new war chief who was more open to peace, of gradual changes in how orcs viewed humans. And every winter, when the ice formed thick and solid, Kora and Matthew returned to their lake. They skated together in the cold air, sometimes racing, sometimes simply gliding side by side, always remembering that first evening. Remembering how far they had come from that moment when she had clung to his arm, terrified and uncertain, to now when she could pull him across the ice with confident strokes. They grew old together in their wilderness home. Matthew's dark hair turned gray. Kora's green skin became lined with age. But they remained partners in all things, facing whatever came with the same determination that had brought them together in the first place. And on their last winter together, when they were both old and their skating days were long past, they sat by the lake and watched the sunset paint the ice in shades of orange and gold. Matthew held Kora's weathered hand in his own, and she leaned against his shoulder. "No regrets?" He asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. "None," she answered, as she always did. "You, not a single one." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that transcended the boundaries their peoples had tried to impose. It had not been easy. It had not been safe. But it had been worth it. Every moment had been worth it. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Kora reflected on the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. From outcast to beloved wife, from uncertain fumbling on the ice to confident mastery, from isolation to connection. All because one human man had chosen to see her as a person rather than a monster, had offered her skates and skating lessons and, eventually, his heart. She had taken all of it, treasured all of it, and built a life more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. That was their story. The orc woman who clung to his arm on her first skates, and by sunset was pulling him across the lake. A story of trust and growth, of love and determination, of two people who refused to let the world tell them what was impossible. A story that proved sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with a single uncertain step onto the ice, with a hand held out in trust, with the courage to try something new despite every reason to be afraid. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for: the courage to try, the faith to believe, the love to make it all worthwhile. Their legacy lived on in the growing peace between humans and orcs, in the occasional mixed couples who followed their example, in the children and grandchildren that eventually resulted from those unions. But more than that, their legacy lived on in the simple truth they had proven through their lives. That love, real love, knows no boundaries. Not of race or species, not of prejudice or hate. Love simply is, and when two people choose it, choose each other, they can overcome anything the world throws at them. Matthew and Kora proved that. On the ice of a frozen lake, in the wilderness of a frontier territory, in the life they built together one day at a time. And that truth, that beautiful truth, endured long after they were gone.